Welcome to the Mad Profit Podcast, where we interview active investors, entrepreneurs, and experts who left corporate jobs to buy or start successful ventures and live life on their own terms. Listen to their stories, learn from their experiences, and heed their advice so you too can create mad profits and the life you've always wanted. And now, here's your host, Laurent Truc.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laurent, and welcome to the Mad Profit Podcast, where we interview investors, entrepreneurs, and experts who have bought, started, or invested in successful businesses and are living the life on their terms. Really excited today to have a good friend of mine and mentor as our guest, Jim Hickey. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Laurent.
Glad you could make it, and really looking forward to this interview. You've had a very interesting background. You and I talked about this a few times, and you've got so much to share. So I'm really looking forward to kind of picking your brain and learning a lot more from you, as I'm sure the audience is as well.
Well, let's have fun doing it.
Perfect. So why don't you kick us off? Can you give me a little bit of background about you and a little bit of the work that you've done, and then we can dive into each one of these individually.
Sure. So look, one of the things that I tell people anytime I get into a situation is to people understanding who I am. I'm, started off life as number 8 started off life number 8 of 8, but ultimately I became 8 of 11 children.
Wow.
And I have 7 brothers, I have 3 sisters, and that informs just about everything I do. You grow up on a farm. Father died when I was a young teenager. My mother carried the load. Still had 8 kids in public school as a single parent. She would have been 51 at the time. So. Incredible. Yeah, and so that does, kind of determine how you approach life. And when you have 10 siblings around and a parent to tell you when you're wrong, I don't recall being told I was right about too many things, but silence I took for being correct behavior. But it does drive you to look at the world in a certain way and, think about things, I would suggest differently than what many others do. Mm-hmm. So, get through public school, go on to university. Purpose for going to university was really, sport related. Play soccer, I played junior hockey, have a competitive streak, no doubt. A competitive streak to win. I was never worried about losing. I know lots of competitive people and really highly competitive people that fight like hell not to lose. I was on the other side of that, and there is a difference. And so, again, my approach to life is really about, doing what I can to win, and the consequences of losing, I never worry about. And once I walk away from a game, it doesn't matter what it is. If I've lost, then, I did what I needed to do to win. And so I don't think too much about it, and I move on to the next thing. Through university, I left the East Coast of Canada, moved to the West Coast, sorted some things out, did a couple of interesting things that really weren't in the business world because I still had no idea what I was going to do. I had a basic science degree that was really focused in the kinesiology world. Mm-hmm. And ended up back in Toronto, heading back east in Toronto, and started off and landed in sales. And I'm a guy that probably was in my early 20s before I really understood anything about the business world. Nothing. I had no mentors in it. Not a single family member went into that space. I didn't have uncles or cousins or, any family members in the space. So women, the older women in my life would have all been, my aunts would have been stay-at-home moms. So I didn't have that influence. So I didn't really know what to expect in the world. I thought people would be a whole lot smarter than what they are, quite frankly. I was surprised that I could walk into that world and compete. And there's lots of smart people out there. The big gap is they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to be smart about it. They're far too cautious. And then there's, the other side of it. There's a lot of people out there that suffer greatly, from thinking that they know a whole lot more than what they do. They've lived privileged lives and are really ill-informed about how the world works. So, that's kind of, my start in the business world. And I ultimately ended up at Bell Canada. Great company. I know there's lots of problems there, and people will complain about customer service and all kinds of stuff. But I enjoyed my education that I got at Bell. So, and it again helps me inform decisions that I still make today based on the privilege of working with some pretty damn smart people, and not just smart, but very capable.
Did you go in through the sales door at Bell? Is that your first avenue in? Yeah. Okay.
I did. I absolutely did. And it again, sales gives you the privilege of being able to work with every aspect of the business if you're doing it right. You get to interface with techs, marketing, finance people. There's no boundary. If you're a really good, dedicated salesperson, you get access wherever you want access because you're dealing with the most precious commodity, right? Being customers.
Yeah, and even on the customer side, you get to play with every different level, whether it's all the way up the chain at C-level, all the way down. You're providing value across those multitude of different individuals, which allows you to understand a business from start to finish, which is great. So at Bell, you moved up pretty rapidly. You came in through the sales door,
Absolutely.
but in a relatively short period of time. What was kind of the last role that you ended up holding there?
So, well, I was a general inside Bell that served. It was called Gateways, and we delivered hardware, software, professional services, even cabling and things like that to the customers. We weren't in the core of the business. We served under the network providers. So, what all the network salespeople selling, the various types of connectivity, we delivered the product that plugged in and used the internet and phone lines and whatnot. And that was I got to be general manager of that division.
You made it work. All the promises from the other salespeople to make it work. Very good.
Yeah, that's there is some truth to that. It's we also caused them some heartache every once in a while too, when the stuff didn't work, and of course we blamed the network.
Of course. And then you decided to move on and start your own thing. Is that right?
That is right. It was an interesting transition. When it came time, because the hardware space wasn't really a highly profitable space to Bell, a decision was made by the new CEO that came in just ahead of that if you weren't hitting certain margins, then we would the focus would come off. And I really didn't agree with the position, because I thought controlling the end device, whether it was a phone, a switch leading to a computer, or when you controlled that edge, that you had a much firmer grip on access to the most precious internet and network, which is where all the money is. And yeah, our margins weren't great. We were operating under 30%, and in any given year between 25 and 30. And so it was in, where most of Bell would have been over 90%, really high margins on network because they had been there for such a long time.
Sure.
So, that was, when that decision came, it was just a good time. I had been there for 12 years. It was a good time for me to reach. And I left on extraordinarily good terms. And so got support, worked with some people, were and able to line up some things that, as I did leave, to do some work with Bell as a customer.
So Net6, tell me a little bit about its setup and why you chose to go into that field. I mean, it sounds like it was obviously a natural extension to what you had been doing and had experience in, but a little bit more background on that.
Sure. So leaving Bell was it was doing some work in the in doing some offshore work. They had done and completed some offshore in some far-flung in India. Hadn't gotten into North Africa or the Philippines yet, but predominantly India. And there were some good things that were happening there. We came back with a thought to say that nearshore work would be a better methodology. And this was an idea not of mine, but somebody at Bell. His pitch was to go to the Caribbean, same time zone, good education structure, good retention numbers. You could really affect and have a positive turn on GDP in some of these small some of the small Caribbean islands. And so focused in on a couple, he saw his opportunity to launch. We were sitting there with the ability to build out the technology in Canada to be able to float a contact center in the Caribbean. We went down, helped them build it out. We got the network established between the island and back into Canada. We built a redundancy in in the voice switch and delivering call center was the first and foremost. But we also handled the data and the computers at the desktop and the connectivity back. So that was our step into it, was serving as a technology provider inside of Bell to delivering their own outsourced business processing.
Got it. So I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's always, how do I take that first leap? How do I take that jump? How do I set myself up so I'm not running out of cash? I'm not failing too quickly on the wrong things. So what was your mindset at the time? Like, were you completely confident, convinced that you jumping into something on your own, you had the ability to do that? Was there angst? How did you prepare?
Yeah, so the structure was something that we kind of walked into. So on the technical side, so I had two partners. One was a guy that operated as an entrepreneur his entire career, and he was in the telecom space. The other guy was a tech at Bell, just this guy that left Italy when he was 17 years old to see the world. Didn't speak English. Moved from Italy to Belgium and then to ultimately to Canada. He spoke French, landed in Montreal at the time, would have been the mid-70s, no work, moved to Toronto without being able to speak English, ultimately ended up at Bell, did 30 years plus as a really solid high-end technician at Bell, but was always dabbling on the outside, doing some other stuff in his spare time and, helping people. And it was just a pretty natural entrepreneur based on, if you leave home when you're 17, you have, higher ambitions. it's a pretty good indication that you're going to press forward. And so, yeah, the three of us came at it from that. I was never concerned. All three of us had our own funding. I had just left Bell. I'd still been operating on a package. They were it was generous. And of course, we were sitting there with a contract already to deliver. And so that part was easy, quite frankly, but you still only have a limited amount of time to be able to get up and add to it if you want to grow.
Sure. Okay. Did it take longer than you thought to get to that point where your run rate could cover your expenses and you felt you were secure?
So no, it didn't take that long to get to a spot where the three of us were profitable. Where it got more complicated was, how do you turn this into a 24-hour, 7-day a week and not be the one holding it together? And me being the not technical one had the least amount of worry about it, because I could take a call at 2 a.m., but I couldn't do anything about it. The other two ones that wore the brunt of that, and that was so how do you go from there to putting a network of people in there that could respond? And we were had the good fortune of having a network of people that we knew from Bell and from other telecom space too. There were some retired people in there, some people that were out there working as consultants and different forms that we were of contracting that we were able to pull in, so they weren't full-time employees. We weren't worried about paying benefits. We weren't any of that. So we established a network of being able to serve our customer and then also add additional customers along the way. And the simple thing was that we were doing outsourcing for technology, mostly attached to call center, but you also have to be great at network in order to be able to do that. Sure. And so we were able to go out and talk to other customers based on the platform that we had built and add very inexpensively other businesses to our phone system. And so you would do that. You'd plug it in over an Ethernet environment. You could add internet to it and build from there. And so we became a wholesale partner with Bell at the same time as well. We did with Atria, Rogers, and we even had a dark
very good
fiber connectivity to a satellite provider. Yeah.
Wow. So was your first customer really the funds that allowed you to get all your follow-up customers, or was the initial investment relatively low? No, it was that first customer that was the impetus to.
Yep. I mean, we did put money in because we had to buy some technology to support it. But it was not, it wasn't heavy funding that came from us personally. It was all based on, landing that customer and then being able to leverage that to adding others. We entered into the wholesale world, which drove our pricing down across the board, which helped us on profitability too. Got it. Really the answer to the question is on how did it happen as quickly as that? Why did you feel so comfortable? Is network. We had all three of us had network that were there to be leveraged, and people that had confidence in us, that knew that we weren't going to hurt them in the market, that we were all capable of delivering that service.
That's excellent. Anything you would have done differently from that first year?
Not in the first year. No. The first year was really good. Really clean, head down, getting the work done. So we could make sure that we were wrinkle free, heading into year two. And that's really where it became more complicated. You start looking at, okay, so we've got this, we're funded it. Now we need to start paying ourselves a little bit. And then you start taking money out of that core to pay yourselves, then that starts to hurt, because it stops your ability to grow. And so then you start getting into some much more difficult decisions on what's next and where you spend your money.
How long did you guys wait before you took your first money out?
A year.
A year?
Yeah, we were probably, this is from memory, I'd say 14 months.
14 months, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And you've had such a great background. I mean, between going up the ranks at the telco, starting Net6, going back to some relatively large brands afterwards and being GM of those businesses. So what would be some advice that you would give to entrepreneurs or even business leaders, like some of the things that really have formed you as a leader that you are today, who's managed, I don't even know how many people you've managed at this point, hundreds easily, right? And obviously they're very different advice to an entrepreneur that's just starting out versus a seasoned executive. But any words of wisdom that you would want to share?
So let me tell you that I left that entrepreneurial world for a particular reason, and it was it started to get to some health issues, not for me, and some concerns. I had done well financially, and so I had a fair bit to protect, and so I decided that was the prudent thing to do. That I had gotten out of that 3.5 years what I really wanted. I wanted to see it was a good way to do it. So I did sell out of it, and the company ultimately sold altogether. But I sold my shares to my partners, and they were very generous and gracious. So have good partners. If you're going to have partners, boy, make sure you know them. Make sure you know. Like a good lawyer will say, is that they don't ask questions that they don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. You better know the answers that your partners will give at any given time. You better know their character. You better know their quality. And if you don't, you better have the authority to make the ultimate decision based on the value of share that you have, or you have very specific mechanics in it to make sure that, and that's a hard thing to do. I get that, but that would be probably my big advice, is that know your partners and know that you know how to trust in that space.
Very good. Very good. I like that one. So Jim, you and I always have a lot of fun conversations. You're one of the most well-informed people that I know. So hoping this is an easy question for you. But what resources can you suggest people go to for business knowledge? Are there books? Are there websites, podcasts? Like, what do you use to kind of stay up to speed and continue your learning?
Sure. So that it is an easy one for me to answer that, because I don't read any business books. I've never read any, and I find them boring. I don't find them, they're prescriptive at best and are antidotes to stuff that aren't problems that I have or I perceive to have. And I get that I don't come at this from a typical business background. I don't even know what that actually is. I typically I stay very up to speed on news. I always know what's going on. I stay well informed. Around what's happening in the world. I understand that different people based on different experience have perceive things very differently, whether it's political or in business. They have reasons, and I try to always understand why do they perceive things the way they do. Why do I perceive things the way I do? What informs me? And that's why I spend a fair bit of time on as to knowing who I am, and being self-reflective, and knowing. Ask myself questions all the time. Okay, why did I ask that question? Why did I answer a question in a certain way? And try to be self-reflective. So when I consider probably the best business book that wasn't a business book that I've read was Michael Lewis' Moneyball, and it was. It's actually, the name of the book is The Art of Winning an Unfair Game, I think. And so it's Moneyball, and then it's The Art of Winning an Unfair Game, I think is the name of it, wholly and completely. And what it teaches is, just because history says so, because that's the way people presented it, doesn't mean that's right. And in fact, it's probably been sitting that way for such a long period of time. It's in fact wrong. And it wasn't so much that it was an unfair game. It's just people didn't understand the rules that were being played. The game that was being played based on the rules, and the rules weren't really informing it. It's, people had imposed these rhythms and rules to a game that didn't even apply. Mm-hmm. And that sits out there in the business world. People make instinctual, what they believe are instinctual decisions on stuff. They look at data to the point where it satisfies them to say that I know what I'm talking about because I can see it here in the evidence. But read the rest of it. Don't find your statistical point that proves your point. Look for the contrary stuff. Look, what you know and what your background and experience is pretty simple stuff. But, I can guarantee you more than 50% of the market doesn't think like me, because they're women and they don't have. And I know for sure I'm one of 8 people that grew up with a similar experience to me. And because they're my brothers, right? That my sister certainly had a different upbringing, and that is I think the number one flaw of business decisioning is people making assumptions that others think like them across the board. Just because you have political alignment with somebody doesn't mean you have alignment on anything else. Mm-hmm. It's just you came to the same conclusion, but perhaps for completely different reasons. And so, you really have to consider, how others are perceiving and how you're looking at the game. So it wasn't really an unfair game when you're talking about Moneyball. The game was fair. It's just that everybody was looking at it, but it was unfair to that person that wasn't being looked at because they were 25 pounds overweight, or they threw the ball in an odd manner. Mm-hmm. They couldn't hit for average, but they were getting on base. So the game was kind of rigged against them because of the lack of leadership, and it almost always comes down to the lack of leadership and middle-aged white men perceiving the world in a very particular way and forgetting about huge parts of the population that don't look or sound like them. So that's probably the most informative. But I have a pretty broad spectrum of people that I pay particular attention to. And I watch their behaviors and understand the things that they do for their successful approach. I love good podcasts. And just generally good information. And I find it in lots of different ways.
Perfect. That's fantastic. I'll talk to you after the fact. We'll put some speakers notes together on other podcasts that you've read or listened to or followed. I think that'd be a great resource for everybody. Perfect, Jim. I can't thank you enough for your time today. This was hugely valuable. Looking forward to putting this all together and posting it in the near future. If somebody wants to reach out to you, or do you want to do a shout out about your current engagement right now, what you're working on?
Sure. Let me give you one more thing before we do that. One other resource. And I have the privilege of having a father-in-law who was the Deputy Minister of Education in New Brunswick. So he achieved the highest level of education and leadership in that world, in that province. But he was also one of the, voted the top influence educators in the world, and got to travel to do that. His first message to me as I stepped into the leadership position was, and this was kind of over years, so I shouldn't say the first message. The first thing that I really understood, it wasn't in a written or even spoken to in one piece, was he said, what comes onto your desk should go off your desk quickly. Don't hold it. And what he was saying was, just like in a meeting as a leader, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you probably should find some other people to come into the room, right? Or the most knowledgeable is probably the better way to look at it based on what the topic is. And rarely, and I've never found myself to be that. I've always known that there are people in the room when I'm meeting about something that is more knowledgeable than me about it. And that's what you absolutely want. And so, the idea of what comes onto your desk should go off your desk, and it should go onto the desk of that more knowledgeable person that can execute on it. And if there isn't a person that you can put it on their desk, it's bloody important. So deal with it. Don't leave things on your desk. And, he was thinking of that literally, because guess what? He's older. He wasn't thinking about email. He wasn't thinking about other messaging platforms. He was thinking about literally thing that came into his in basket and then, went to his out basket, right? So, he did at the end of his career, of course, he was dealing with email. It would have been only email. That was a really, really important. If you accept this into your world, deal with it. Either deal with it by putting it with the right person or sending it back to the person that sent it to you in the first place, but deal with it. Mm-hmm. And what's left is bloody well important, so you really better deal with it. So, so to add that to that, what I'm doing now as I'm the managing director and the privilege of leading a team here in Canada at Sterling Backcheck. We have our own brand. We roll up into the head office in New York, but we have full autonomy here in the Canadian market to make decisions and care for our customers in our own very particular Canadian way. We have a team of around 600 that services our customers, and we're in the identity world and verification, employment verification, pre-employment verification, and not just pre-employment, but we also do a verification for existing customers that have sensitive employment and crim checks and identity verification. We use pretty good high-tech solutions in some areas and pretty low-tech in others to deliver our services. So if you're looking for us, you can find us at sterlingcheck.ca.
Perfect. Very good. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, Jim, thank you again. Really appreciate the time you took today. And I can't wait to get this posted and get some feedback. And hopefully we can connect again in a few months or years, see how things are going, see if maybe you started some other entrepreneurial engagement between now and then. So look forward to continuing to connect. And thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mad Profit Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or the listening platform of your choice. Also, check us out at madxcapital.com for more useful information and resources to help you achieve your investing, entrepreneurial, and business goals. See you next week on the Mad Profit Podcast.